"Hey, black boy, get to work." The words didn't just ring out, they tore through the festive air, slicing through the sparkling chandelier light like a knife through silk. A cold, cynical laugh echoed across the grand ballroom. Tonight was the Whitmore's night, a celebration of their imminent sale of a part of their empire to Brooks Global for a staggering $900 million. The city's entire elite was in attendance, dressed in bespoke outfits, adorned with expensive jewelry, and exchanging well-rehearsed, artificial smiles. He stood there, next to the champagne tower, in a simple black suit. No sequins, no diamond earrings, he needed no symbols to display his power. He lifted his phone to his ear, his sharp eyes fixed on the pointing man. Behind the man, a group of tuxedo-clad women snickered, one even snapping her fingers at him as if he were a waiter. "Marcus, confirm the final terms." His voice was low and steady, almost lost in the din. "This deal needs to be airtight, with no loopholes. Ensure a smooth transfer on Monday morning." He glanced around, spotting Richard Whitmore, who was patting a politician on the back, his laughter loud and fake. Eleanor Whitmore, his wife, glided like a queen, her diamond necklace sparkling with every step. They were the center of the party, and they reveled in it. Daniel gave a slight smirk. He had never understood such vanity. To him, power wasn't about how others saw you, but about what you could do when no one was looking. The call was interrupted by a condescending voice right next to him. "Hey, black boy, get to work." Daniel lowered his phone slightly and turned. A middle-aged man stood there. The Patek Philippe watch on his wrist gleamed like a declaration of his status. Richard's eyes swept over Daniel from head to toe, a quick, contemptuous once-over. Simple suit, no jewelry, doesn't look like anyone important, was what was written all over his face. "Get me a glass of champagne. Hurry up," Richard ordered, not requested. He snapped his fingers and turned away, resuming his conversation with someone else, not sparing Daniel another second. Daniel didn't say a word. He watched in silence, his composure almost eerie. He knew this situation well. He'd been through it countless times. Back before Brooks Global was a powerhouse, people took one look at his appearance and made assumptions. To Richard Whitmore, a black man in a simple suit standing alone could only be a member of the catering staff. Before Daniel could react, another, sharper voice cut in. Eleanor Whitmore, Richard's wife, had glided over, fanning herself with a feathered fan. She looked at Daniel with open disdain. "Richard, what are you doing?" she said, her voice high-pitched. "Don't talk to the staff. Just let them do their jobs." She turned to Daniel, her thin lips pursed. "This isn't a place for staff to be loitering. Your station is in the back by the kitchen. Or are you lost?" The humiliation was now public. A few nearby guests turned to watch, curious and mocking smiles on their faces. They were ready for a show. "Which catering company are you with?" a tall woman on her left asked, raising her champagne glass. "If you're quick, we might even give you an extra tip." The man next to her smirked, ready to land the final blow. "This is for investors only, my friend." Daniel's lips twisted into a slight, sarcastic smile. He'd seen this attitude too many times. At 28, he was kicked out of a meeting he was supposed to lead because someone couldn't find his name on the list. At 34, he was mistaken for his own assistant during a buyout negotiation, and in a board meeting, an investor patted his shoulder and said, "Good job, kid. Now go get me a cup of coffee." Daniel had smiled politely then, but that night, he worked until 3 a.m. to ensure that man never had the chance to speak to him like that again. He had built everything so he would never have to endure that humiliation again. The woman's voice rang out again, louder. "Security." A security guard looked up from the entrance, confused. The powerful matriarch, with her strand of pearls and eyes of steel, yanked the event badge from Daniel's wrist. The sound of tearing paper was loud enough to cut through the music of the string quartet. "Get him out of here." Daniel was unfazed. The external chaos couldn't touch his internal stillness. He looked straight into Eleanor's eyes, a blank, emotionless stare. This seemed to enrage her even more. He slowly brought his phone back to his ear, turning his back on the most powerful couple in the room. "Marcus," he said, his voice still calm, but now with a deadly steeliness. "Change of plans. This is happening. Now." He paused for a beat, his gaze sweeping over Eleanor's flushed face. "Cancel the $900 million deal." A deadly silence. Even Marcus, his most composed partner, took a second to process the information. Daniel's words, though spoken at a normal volume, had the weight of a bomb. The surrounding guests froze, laughter died away. $900 million. What the hell was this caterer talking about? Eleanor Whitmore was stunned, then burst into a piercing laugh. "Oh my God, Richard, did you hear that? He's putting on a show. Who does he think he is? This is ridiculous." Richard laughed along, a look of smugness on his face. He must have had too much champagne. "Security, get him out of here." The Whitmores were furious. The idea that a nobody would dare to mock them at their own party was intolerable. Their arrogance was wounded. Eleanor, in a fit of rage, stepped forward and snatched the event badge from Daniel's lapel. "You don't belong here," she shrieked, her voice cracking with fury. The badge read Daniel Brooks, esteemed guest, but she didn't bother to read it. To her, it was just a piece of worthless paper. "Rip." In front of everyone, in front of the raised phones, Eleanor Whitmore tore the event badge into multiple pieces and threw them on the floor. "You don't belong here," she hissed, her beautiful face contorted with hatred. The room fell silent. The music seemed to stop. Everyone stared at the unfolding scene. In a corner of the room, young reporter Allison Reeves felt her heart pound. She had been sent to write a boring society piece, but her real goal was to get a photo or comment from Daniel Brooks, the reclusive, powerful CEO of Brooks Global, who rarely made public appearances and was the architect behind this deal. His name was at the top of the VIP guest list she'd reviewed. As she watched the calm black man being humiliated, a professional instinct surged. This was it. This wasn't a society piece. This was a bombshell story. She quickly raised her phone, hitting record. Her lens zoomed in. This confrontation was no longer private. It had become a social media time bomb, and the clock was ticking. Finally, the security guard stepped toward him, slowly and cautiously. "Sir, I need to see your credentials." "They were torn," Daniel said calmly, nodding toward the scraps of the badge in the pearl-wearing woman's hand. Reporter Allison's eyebrows shot up, and she adjusted her phone, capturing the image of the woman holding the fragments like a trophy. The matriarch sneered, "We can do this the easy way, or the hard way." Daniel lowered his phone just enough for his voice to carry. "You've already chosen the hard way." Then, he brought the phone back to his ear. "Transfer the capital to Harlow. Don't wait for the signing, Marcus." A wave of murmuring swept through the crowd. A man in a grey suit whispered to his wife, "Did he just say Harlow?" His wife's eyes widened. The tall woman in the group scoffed, "Is this some kind of bluff? Do you think we'll believe a lie?" Daniel's gaze was unwavering. "It's not a lie. It's business." Allison, the reporter, stepped forward, her voice careful but clear. "I can confirm he was invited. I saw his name on the investor list this afternoon." "Oh, you must have misread it," the tall woman said with a cold laugh. "I didn't," Allison replied, raising her phone a little higher. "And I'm not the only one who saw it." A heavy silence descended upon the ballroom like a velvet curtain. Just seconds ago, this was a space of celebration. Now, it had become a battlefield. The Whitmores, instead of being remorseful, felt even more challenged. They couldn't let a fraud ruin their big night. "Security, security," Richard Whitmore bellowed, his face flushed. "What are you doing? Get this clown out of here right now." Two large security guards in black uniforms began to advance on Daniel. The crowd parted, forming a circle around them, like spectators eagerly awaiting a bullfight. Daniel finally lowered his phone. He didn't look at the approaching guards, but stared straight into Richard and Eleanor's eyes. His cold calm was in stark contrast to their frenzy. As the two security guards were about to grab Daniel, a clear and decisive voice rang out. "Stop!" Everyone turned. Alison Reeves, the young reporter, had stepped out of the crowd, her phone still held high like a weapon. Her eyes were burning. "You can't do that," she said, her voice shaking with adrenaline but full of conviction. She looked directly at the taller guard. "I'm a reporter for the Capital Times, and I saw his name on the guest list. He's a guest." Richard Whitmore scoffed. What would a little reporter know? The guest list. He must have snuck in. That's it. "Excuse me," a young, flustered voice piped up. "I think there's a misunderstanding here." Everyone turned to look at a young man in his 20s, standing at the edge of the crowd. He was wearing a navy blue suit, looking out of place among the others, but his tie bore the Whitmore Global logo. "Uncle," he said, his voice almost trembling as he turned to the tall woman. "I saw his name on the list. He is our guest." His words not only startled the Whitmores but also made the guards hesitate. This generational confrontation brought a new sense of complexity to the moment. The unexpected support from two strangers, a reporter and a caterer, created the first crack in the crowd's confidence. Maybe this man wasn't a fraud after all. Daniel gave a subtle nod of appreciation to Alison and the young man. Then he raised his phone back to his ear, an action that was now more menacing than any words. The entire crowd held its breath. The matriarch's eyes narrowed. Daniel brought the phone back to his ear. "Confirm full capital withdrawal. Divert it to Harlow Corporation. Notify both legal teams." Across the room, someone choked on their champagne. The tall woman laughed again, but this time her laughter broke mid-sentence. "You can't divert anything. You're nobody here." From behind, the young caterer spoke up again. "He's not nobody. You can't cancel a $900 million deal unless you own a big piece of it." The matriarch whirled around. "Get out of the way, kid." "Too late," Alison interjected, her voice sharpening. "You made this everyone's business the moment you tore up his badge." The security guards stopped 2 steps away from Daniel, their eyes darting between the accusers and the growing crowd. Several phones were now openly raised, the red record dots blinking like tiny warnings. Daniel's voice remained low, deliberate. "For the last time, are you sure you want me escorted out?" The matriarch didn't hesitate. "Absolutely." She nodded to the guard. "Do it." "Oh." He took one more step, and that's when Daniel moved, not backward, but forward, closing the distance between himself and the group that had surrounded him. The pearl-wearing woman's posture faltered, just enough for every watching eye to notice. Daniel spoke without raising his voice, but every word carried weight. "You just told the wrong person he doesn't belong in a room he paid for." The storm had officially erupted. The ballroom no longer buzzed. It thrummed. Every gaze, every whisper was a current running through the room, feeding something no one could yet name. Daniel held the phone steady, his eyes never leaving the matriarch. "Proceed with phase 3. On the other end, Rebecca, his chief of staff's voice was crisp. "Copy that. Legal is online. The capital transfer is in progress." The tall woman scoffed. The sound was now shrill. "Phase 3, is this a game?" Daniel's gaze flickered to her for the first time. "It's not a game. It's an audit." The words were heavy and inevitable, like a file cabinet dropped from a height. From across the room, Alison spoke up again. "If he's bluffing, why do you all look so worried?" Her phone was angled so that both Daniel and his accusers were in the frame. The matriarch shot back. "Because this man is trying to humiliate my family at a public event." "No," Daniel gently corrected. "I'm just letting your actions speak for themselves." The security guard shifted uncomfortably. He'd seen enough power plays at high-end events to recognize when something was collapsing. Rebecca's voice returned in Daniel's ear. "The corporation has flagged the Whitmore family's investment portfolio for breach of good faith in negotiations. Do you want me to link Harlow's team now?" Daniel's gaze swept the room. Many phones were recording, some subtle, others defiant. "Yes," he said. "Make it loud." "Oh." The tall woman laughed, but it was a hollow sound. Even if you had the power, no one cancels a $900 million deal in the middle of a gala. That's not how the world works. That's exactly how my world works, Daniel said. The matriarch stepped back in, her voice sharp. Do you know who you're talking to? Yes, Daniel replied, and this time his smile was a slight smirk. Do you? The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken weight. Allison took a small, audible breath. I think we're all about to find out. Daniel lowered his phone. His voice was calm, but there was a razor-sharp edge to it. You called me a fraud. You tore up my credentials. You tried to throw me out of a deal I built. And through it all, I was patient. He stepped forward, closing the distance. My patience has run out. Rebecca's voice came one last time. All parties have been notified. The press release has been drafted. You're clear to proceed. Daniel looked at the matriarch, the tall woman, her pearl necklace gleaming under the chandelier. Good, he said. Let's end this. The entire room held its breath. The reveal was imminent. The chandelier light seemed to slant toward him. Every phone lens was focused. Even the string quartet had slowed their playing. Daniel stepped into the space between himself and the Whitmore family. His heels clicked on the marble floor, a sound like a countdown. You've spent the last 15 minutes treating me as if I'd wandered in here by mistake, he began. You've accused me of fraud. You've called for security. You've destroyed my credentials in front of 200 witnesses. The tall woman crossed her arms, trying for a sneer. The matriarch's jaw was clenched, and through it all, Daniel continued. You never once asked for my name. He paused. The silence was heavy. My name is Daniel Brooks, he said, his voice rising just enough to carry to the edges of the ballroom. CEO of Brooks Global, the architect of the very deal you're celebrating tonight, the $900 million acquisition you've been bragging about. I built it, I funded it, and I just gave it to your competitor. The words exploded. The matriarch's eyes blinked open, her mouth agape but silent. The tall woman's arms dropped to her sides. Gasps rose from the crowd. One man clapped, then others joined in. Richard Whitmore, the man who had started it all with a condescending request, stood frozen. His face went from red to ashen. He slowly sank into the nearest chair, the champagne glass in his hand falling and shattering on the marble floor in a sharp sound that no one even noticed. You're bluffing, the tall woman said. Daniel tilted his head. Check your phones. She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. Her eyes flickered to the screen. The color drained from her face. The matriarch did the same, her fingers trembling as she read. Around them, others reacted to the same breaking news notification. Whitmore Global loses $900 million. Harlow Corporation deal effective immediately. Allison's camera caught the exact moment the matriarch's posture collapsed. Her shoulders slumped. The tall woman turned away. I didn't have to say a word, Daniel said into the sudden quiet. I didn't have to call the press. You did all that for me. All I did was let you be seen. Allison stepped closer, her phone still recording. You know, she said, you answered all my questions before I even had to ask. Daniel looked at her, giving a slight nod. It's a strategy, Allison smiled. I'll make sure everyone knows that. I have no doubt, Daniel replied, his voice gentle but powerful. The tall woman's face was now flushed, but not with confidence. Her jaw worked silently before she mumbled to the matriarch. We can fix this. No, the matriarch snapped, her eyes darting toward the door as if to escape the humiliation. But there was no escape from the lenses locked onto her. Allison's phone was still rolling, zoomed in, capturing the pearls on the matriarch's tightening throat. On the other side, the caterer set down his tray and crossed his arms, a small, defiant smile on his face. The string quartet had stopped playing, their bows resting, watching the real performance unfold. A man in a navy suit, one of the Whitmore's advisors, stepped forward. Daniel, this isn't necessary. We can renegotiate. Daniel didn't even turn around. You had your chance to talk to me when you thought I was a caterer. You wasted it. The security guard, still a few steps away, shifted his weight. Sir, I apologize. His voice was low, but it carried in the sudden silence. The tall woman tried again, desperation cracking her voice. Listen, we didn't. Yes, you did. Daniel cut her off, the finality in his tone silencing her. And now you have to live with it. From the side, Allison spoke to no one in particular, but her voice was still being recorded. This is what happens when power walks in quietly. A wave of assent rippled through the crowd. Some people began to clap again, more steadily, the sound rising in the high-ceilinged space. Others just watched, phones raised, knowing they were capturing a moment that would travel far beyond the ballroom. The pearl-wearing matriarch attempted one last play. We can make this right. Daniel stepped closer, not aggressively, just with purpose. Right would have been recognizing me before I had to introduce myself. Right would have been treating a stranger with basic respect. Now all you have is a lost deal. Silence. The caterer spoke again, his voice more firm. You can't erase a man twice. The words carried weight. Even the security guard gave a slow, deliberate nod. Daniel straightened. This conversation is over, and so is my time with you. The silence in the ballroom now held a different meaning. It was no longer the silence of shock, but the silence of judgment. The crowd, like predators who smelled blood, watched the collapse of the Whitmore dynasty with morbid curiosity. An elderly man, perhaps a close lawyer for the Whitmores, mustered his courage and stepped toward Daniel. He tried to offer a conciliatory smile, but it looked distorted. "Mr. Brooks," he began, his voice trembling, "this is clearly a terrible misunderstanding. I'm sure we can." Daniel raised a hand, cutting him off. He didn't even look at the man. His gaze remained fixed on Richard and Eleanor Whitmore. "A misunderstanding?" Daniel repeated, his voice like steel. "No, this was not a misunderstanding. This was a choice. You looked at me, and you made a choice based on your prejudice. You had the chance to correct it, to ask my name, to treat me like a human being, but you chose arrogance. You wasted that chance when you thought I was just a caterer." He turned, his eyes sweeping over the hushed crowd, the very people who had laughed along with the humiliation just minutes ago. "And thank you, honored guests. You have shown me the true nature of silence in the face of injustice. It's a lesson I won't forget." He turned to the event manager. "Bring out more champagne, the good kind." The manager, his face pale, nodded hastily and signaled to the staff. As new champagne glasses were brought out, Daniel took one. He didn't offer it to the Whitmores. He raised his glass, gesturing toward a group of people standing in a corner who had been previously unnoticed. It was the executive team of Harlow Corporation, whom he had secretly invited. Harlow's CEO, a shrewd woman, nodded back at him, a triumphant smile on her face. Daniel raised his glass. His voice echoed through the hall. This evening, originally, was meant to celebrate a deal. "And it still will," he announced. "We'll just be celebrating a different one. I would like to formally transfer this celebration to its new owners, the Harlow Corporation. Congratulations, Harlow. You just got a great deal." Applause erupted, hesitant at first, then growing louder. They were clapping for the fall of one empire and the rise of another, all in the same night. It was the most brutal and spectacular display of power they had ever witnessed. Daniel took a sip of his champagne, set the glass down, and turned to walk away, without another word to the Whitmores. He walked through the crowd that parted like water. Allison Reeves rushed to follow, hoping for a comment, but Daniel just gave her a slight nod and walked straight out, where his black car was waiting. The Whitmores' inner circle disbanded, each person looking down at their phone, sending frantic texts to control the situation. A public relations crisis manager, his face tight, rushed in from the hallway, tablet in hand. The tall woman looked at the screen he showed her and cursed. An hour later, on the top floor of the Brooks Global Tower, Daniel was back in his office. He had changed out of his suit into a comfortable shirt, its sleeves rolled up. He stood before a massive screen displaying stock market charts, his face devoid of emotion. His executive team and Harlow's directors were all present, some on video calls. The room was buzzing with a high-stakes energy and focus. "Whitmore's stock is down 35% and still dropping," Marcus reported. "They're trying to issue a press release saying the cancellation was mutually agreed upon. No one's buying it." Daniel nodded. "Good. Now for phase 4, the full court press. I want us to tighten the noose to prevent them from any chance of recovery." He looked at Harlow's CEO on the screen. "Miss Henderson, my team will work with yours. Whitmore has some crucial patents about to expire. We'll acquire all of them. They have licensing agreements with Asian suppliers. We'll make a better offer and snatch them. Any talent that wants to jump from that sinking ship, we'll welcome them with lucrative contracts." He paused, looking out at the city. "We will acquire every pending trademark, patent, or licensing agreement Whitmore has. Hold them long enough so they can't be used. We'll choke their supply chain, cut off their funding. In 6 months, I want the name Whitmore to be a cautionary tale in business textbooks." This was no longer a personal vendetta. This was cold, calculated business. The Whitmore family had shown themselves to be unreliable partners, driven by emotion and prejudice. In Daniel's world, that was an unforgivable weakness. An assistant walked in, placing a tablet on his desk. "Sir, an urgent letter from the Whitmore family's lawyer." The subject line read, "Sincere apology and offer to renegotiate." Daniel didn't read it. He simply slid his finger across the screen, dragging the letter to the digital trash bin. A small, silent act, but one with immense weight. Daniel stood in his office, looking out at the city he had helped build. The action of deleting that urgent letter demonstrated that he had absolute power. He didn't need their explanation, their apology, or their pleas. They had become irrelevant. He had proven that he didn't just belong in that ballroom. He didn't just pay for it. He, with his intellect, his resolve, and his self-respect, had built it, and he had every right to tear it down if necessary. Tonight, he did exactly that.